Hey everybody, I'm Jason. This is Jay's Project Garage. So I'm on the backside of being sick. Had the flu. Still not feeling me. I actually missed half a day of work on Wednesday, which is totally unlike me. I don't normally miss any work for anything, but I wasn't feeling good. So I think over the course of this weekend, we're going to dive back into the 5 liter. I'm going to show you some measuring tools and that kind of stuff and other things to look for. And I'm going to clarify some statements I made in the last one about the Joe Sherman engine. But for now, I got to run into town and go to Lowe's. I got to pick up some electrical stuff. I'm putting lights and heat lamps and all that stuff out in the new chicken coop and goat barn. My wife bought these. I'm sure you guys have seen the regular heat lamps. They've got like a silver shroud on them, like a reflector thing. It's just got a regular heat lamp bulb that goes in. Well, we kept having problems with it when the bulb went bad. The glass part would fall out and would break on the floor, and that's the cause of a lot of barn fires and stuff. But she found these big plastic ones that had this like a grate thing on the bottom. It's made out of plastic, so even if the bulb does go bad and fall, it can't go anywhere. That's a pretty cool idea. But they were expensive. They were like 65 bucks a piece. If they work, then so I'm gonna get all that stuff done. I'm gonna work on it today. And the kids are getting all the chickens moved into the new coops and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool. I just got a few things left to finish on it, and I'm gonna try. But in between that, when I come inside to get warm, I've got the wood furnace running. It's starting to get warm in here. I'm gonna mess around with the 5 liter, and we're gonna talk about what's going on with it. So let's get to the lame action. Okay, so just real quick, this is some of the equipment that I'm going to be using to measure the stuff on this engine. And I'll show you kind of a poor man's way to at least get a little bit of an idea. This is vernier calipers, and this is a digital one. I like these because they're quick and easy. I've also got a bigger set for measuring push rods and that kind of stuff. These are fairly accurate. You can get a pretty good idea where you're at on everything. You can buy these really pretty cheap. I know you can get them at Harbor Freight. This I grabbed at a swap meet, but it goes from 0 to 4 inch. I bought these from a retired machinist. He just had them calibrated not too long before he retired. This is a really good set. But this saves you from having to buy 4 or 5 different mics. You can just buy one that goes from 0 to 4, and then you can buy one that goes incrementally bigger than that. I have another one that goes from 4 to 6 inch, I think. But we can use this to measure or to set up our dial bore gauge to check the bores and that kind of stuff. Here's the dial bore gauge. And I'll show you how to set all this stuff up. Basically, it's just going to show you outer round or taper or that kind of stuff in the cylinder walls. And then we may use this. I'm not really sure. It's just a dial indicator. We might use it to check deck height when we do the piston flip thing to see if it changes anything. But that's just a real quick rundown on the tools themselves, the stuff that we're going to be using. We're not making parts for the space shuttle, so we don't have to be like mega precise when we're just measuring an engine to see what it's going to need when we take it to the machine shop. Now, I don't know what machine shops are like everywhere, but I know some of the ones around here have a reputation where, you know, it doesn't matter what you tell them that you want done. They kind of have a set program. You know, I'm going to cut your crank 10 whether it actually needs it or not, or I'm going to tell you the block needs bored 30 thousandths whether it needs it or not, or whatever. There's a lot of them that are trustworthy, but there's some that aren't. So it pays to measure your own stuff before you take it. That way you're not spending money on stuff that you don't actually need. But as far as the equipment itself goes, you don't have to spend crazy money. Don't buy the cheapest stuff that you can get from Hobo Freight. But you don't have to buy the most expensive Stair Mitutoyo stuff either. You can buy off-brand, and it works just fine for what we're doing. I'm not building $100,000 race engines. This is kind of just stock junk stuff. So keep that in mind. I probably only have all the stuff I just showed you. I probably only have a couple $100 in all of that, maybe 250. So, if you're planning on doing this stuff a lot, or if you're young and you don't know if you're going to be doing a lot or not, just go ahead and invest in some tools. That way you got them. And then, like I said, I'll give you a quick rundown on how to use all that stuff. All right, so the comment was made in the last video about me criticizing myself. That's just something I do. I am my own worst critic. It drives I drive myself to always do better. I don't have low self-esteem or anything. It's nothing like that. It's just a lot of people do that. I don't know. But this is the dial bore gauge. The first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go through and we're gonna look at the bores and see how bad they are. We know these things have rust in them, so kind of knee-jerk reaction is the thing's gonna need bored, and I'm probably just gonna go ahead and do that anyway. But we're gonna look and see how bad the bore taper and that kind of stuff is. We're gonna use this, and we're gonna use the mic to set this up to make sure. Well, actually, you know what? It doesn't even really matter. We already know it's standard bore, so it's 4-inch. So all I'm really curious about is how bad the run out is. So I'm gonna get this all set up, and then I'll bring you guys in, and I'll show you the gauge and see what's going on with it. Okay, when I start, I always start at the top of the bore, because this is the spot where the rings never rode. So this is most likely to be the true, what the bore originally was, which should be 4-inch. Basically, it's going to slide this in, try to keep it on that ridge, and then you're going to spin this to the bezel to zero it. It should be pretty close to zero. And I always go this direction, then I'll go this direction, then I may go, on this one it's not really as critical because I already kind of have a game plan for it, but you're basically going to watch the gauge, and you're going to want to wiggle it around a little bit to try to keep the measuring tool square in the bore. Okay, and what I found was I actually only have a few thousandths of run out or out around, and it's only on the thrust side of the bore. On the sides and the top, there is no ring ridge. It's only on the bottom. That's where the piston, the angle of the rod was pushing the piston against the cylinder wall, and that's where you're really going to have the most wear, is right above where the ring ridge would normally, on a worn engine, where the ring ridge is going to be. Just below that, probably an inch or so, there's going to be almost kind of a gouge cut out of the cylinder wall, and that's from the crankshaft and the angle of the rod pushing the piston against the cylinder wall. All the way around, the rest of the way around, it feels really good, and the bores are actually in really good shape. But because of that kind of gouged out part, then it's definitely going to need to be bored. But according to this, we could actually go less than 30 thousandths, but because 30 is kind of a standard size and I've already got the pistons, then it's going to clean up at that no problem, as long as that rust doesn't become an issue. But like I said in previous videos, it doesn't feel or look pitted at all. It's just kind of a surface crud. I ran a dingle ball hone down through it, and just to knock the crap off of it, and it looks like it would clean up fine. So next we're going to get the mic out, and we're going to look at the crankshaft, and I'm going to show you what I was talking about with the journal and the weird rod bearing wear. I'll use the mic, and we're going to check those journals. I've seen it a lot of times on Facebook and stuff like that, where guys are, take a picture of their cylinder wall and it's got like a vertical line on it. Well, I just got this thing back from the machine shop, and is there something wrong with this? I can see it, but I can't feel it. That's from the dial bore gauge being slid down in. It's not a gouge. It's not going to hurt a single thing. It's just part of the measuring process after they've machined it. So don't get scared. I've already measured this journal, and I've already found out that it's not perfectly straight like it's supposed to be. But I'll take your head off your stand, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so if you look at this journal, it's nice and smooth. There aren't any gouges in it. It's nice and shiny. Looks really good. So a lot of guys will just take it straight to the machine shop and just polish it. It'll be fine. And you know what? For a stock rebuild, it may be. But if you're really serious about and meticulous and wanting to know that everything in the engine was perfect when you started, then you'd get the crank cut so that the journals were perfectly exactly the same all the way across. So you don't want to run into that weird bearing wear issue like we had before. Now I've already, like I said, I already measured these, and we're good on the edges, but it is definitely looser in the center. Okay, something I want to throw in here. I'm not feeling well. It's half a thousandth, not a thousandth. And as far as the bore wear goes, that's something that the piston flip is supposed to change. From the factory, the offset will actually push the piston against the cylinder wall to reduce noise. Flipping it actually frees the engine up a little bit, and supposedly won't load the cylinder wall the same, so you're gaining improved rod angle and reducing friction. I don't know, but I'll throw this part in the video somewhere to kind of clarify that. So I'm sure you guys have heard guys say, yeah, my engine's blueprinted. That's the blueprinting process. When you're getting ready to start putting the engine back together, you're going through and you're checking every clearance on everything and knowing is exactly where it needs to be. Across that journal, difference from side to side is well within manufacturer's tolerances, and it'd probably be perfectly fine. But me, I like knowing that everything, when I start out, everything is that way. If there is a failure, I know it's not because something wasn't right. I can be overly meticulous on some things, and other stuff, it's just, if I'm just doing a stock rebuild, I'll just do some quick checks and then throw the thing together. So I guess it just depends on how serious you really honestly want to be. Let me go grab a piston. I got something I need to tell you guys. Actually, it's a couple things. 3 things. So a guy at work has a newer Camaro LS. Just had a 400 some inch LS built for it. It's got a Holley high ram on it and ported heads, and I mean, it's a pretty decent setup. As soon as he fired it, started making a racket in the top end, so he pulled the valve covers off. Thought the rockers were hitting the valve covers, and they weren't. Had the valve lash all wrong, went up tearing the hell out of a rocker and a push rod, so he had to replace those. Fired it up again, and now it's making noise in the bottom end. He had the short block built by somebody else, and what he found was on this part of the piston right here, in a spot about 3/4 of an inch wide, it is chewed up, almost like the rod is bent, or there's something wrong with the wrist pin, or the piston's made wrong, or something. He said the ring gaps weren't right. So I may be fixing it for him. I'm not 100% sure. It was built by a reputable speed shop up in Indy, but he wasn't the slightest bit happy with the results. So we may be doing that on the channel, and we'll go through and we'll use all the measuring tools. We'll figure out what happened and why, and make sure it doesn't happen again. But as far as this goes, what was I going to talk about? I'm sure there was some point. Ooh. So, let me put my Karma glasses on. So I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it or not. You can on the other ones, but the majority of forged rods are numbered from the factory. I think that just kind of makes it idiot proof for the guys on, because back then engines were still assembled by hand. Can you kind of make out that stamp right there? A lot of guys get overly concerned with that. I don't. There's a good machine shop will go through and they'll measure each individual connecting rod, each individual piston, and then they'll come up with an average for the bob weight when they're balancing your crankshaft and stuff. The factory never did that. They had a little bit of an idea. I mean, they knew what the bob weights were, but it was just an average over lots of them. So there could be plus or minus 3-4 grams. I mean, it's really kind of hard to say. But it made the engine run smooth enough because they weren't revving these things 6,500, 7,000, 9,000, who knows what, where it becomes super critical. My point is, this rod and this piston have absolutely no idea what hole they're supposed to be in. None. If you buy a brand new set of connecting rods, they're not going to be numbered. If you buy a set of pistons, they're not going to be numbered. It doesn't really matter. The conventional way of assembling an engine is that goes towards the front. You just need to make sure that the rod and piston are oriented correctly with each other. So, and I'll show you that here in just a second. So the connecting rod will ride how it's supposed to on the crankshaft and that kind of stuff. So if you pull an engine apart and all the numbers are mixed up, don't overthink it. Fords are super easy. GMs you have to look at for just a second, but it's pretty obvious which direction they go to. Can you see how the bearing sits back from the edge of the rod? Can you see on this side how it's flush? You know that this side goes against the other connecting rod. And this side goes, of course, against the cheek or the fillet of the crankshaft, and we'll talk about that here in just 1 second. So as long as you have those oriented correctly, it doesn't matter what hole that goes in. It doesn't know and doesn't care. So just keep that in mind. And then I'll show you the crankshaft and kind of explain the fillet. Okay, now crankshafts are ground with stones. Now a lot of machine shop will polish them with like a belt, and you guys may have seen them before. It's kind of a big belt sander looking thing. So when these things are ground with stones, they don't make a perfect 90 where the journal meets the counterweight of the crankshaft. There's kind of a roll in there. There's a couple of different reasons why that's good. Number one, it actually makes the crankshaft stronger. And number two, not having that sharp 90 in there helps reduce the risk of a crack. Think of it like a gusset. So if you guys have ever been welding around welder fabricators, you ever seen anything that was fabricated and they reinforce something with like a triangle shaped gusset, and where two pieces of steel come together, there'd be a gusset in there. Think of that the same way. That just helps strengthen that part of the crankshaft. So it kind of needs to be there. But that's the reason the connecting rods are made the way they are and the way the bearings sit. So it leaves room for the fillet, or that radius, where it goes from the journal up to the counterweight. So it pays to pay attention when you're disassembling the engine. That way you can see what's going on with everything. As far as setting up the dial bore gauge, I wasn't trying to measure the bore. I just wanted to check for outer round and that kind of stuff. The bores are actually in really good shape. This engine probably had some miles on it. And then other than that spot on the cylinder wall on the thrust side of the piston where it was kind of digging in, the rest of it looks pretty good, and it'll definitely clean up, no issues at 30,000. I'm not the slightest bit worried about the rust or anything else. Crankshaft would probably be fine. Now obviously I'd need to bust the whole thing down and I'd need to mic the mains too, but the crankshaft would probably be fine with a polish. but we can send it and get it cut 1010 and polished, and then we can measure it again to see how good the crank grinder is. And that's part of what you do when you're assembling the engine. You double check to make sure that the machinist did everything correctly. Now there's a lot of machine shops out there that don't have crank grinders because they're expensive, and they would have to run a whole bunch of crankshafts through that thing just to pay for that piece of equipment, and they don't do that many cranks. So you have companies like, I think it's Indianapolis Crankshaft or something like that. That's all they do, and they do a bunch of them. And all the cranks that I've had cut for probably the last 15 years has gone through them. So it's kind of something to keep in mind. I don't know. I don't feel good, guys. I'm sorry. I wanted this video to be better than it is, but and I need to go do some running. The next part of this video, or probably, I think we're just going to cut this. I think the next video is just going to be us diving into the piston flip thing and see what's up with it. And then I need to get back on the 69. But I'm going to go do my running. I'm going to do some stuff for the kids, and we'll see how I feel tomorrow. If I'm up to it, then we'll start measuring piston flip stuff. I'll get my degree wheel out, we'll put it on there. We'll measure where the piston is at different places and see if that change in rod angle changes the position of the piston, or if it has any effect on piston speed in the center of the stroke or any of that kind of stuff. I think it might, but I seriously don't think, I don't know. Like I said, I'm trying to be objective about the whole thing. Joe Sherman was pretty adamant that it did make a difference, but I don't do a whole lot of stuff with stock parts unless it's just a stock rebuild and I'm not going for like crazy power. If I'm going for power, I'm going for power, you know? But to clarify that, something on that Joe Sherman thing where I said he made 400 horsepower with all stock parts, it had a camshaft in it. And he tried 2 different intakes. It had a Performer RPM, and he tried a Victor Jr. And I don't remember where the compression ratio wound up being, but he used a set of early 289 heads with a smaller combustion chamber. I've got like 6 sets of them. Ported the hell out of them, and he put bigger 194 Chevy size valves, and I think they were 194 1.6, and he did some stuff with the combustion chamber. He modified the hell out of those heads, but they worked great. So I don't know. I got a lot of respect for the guy. Unfortunately, he's passed now, but I have a lot of respect for his work. And he actually won the very first Engine Masters Challenge. May have won the first couple with small block Chevys. I'm not sure. I know he won the first one. Very smart guy. Knew what he was talking about. But I think that's it. You guys get out in the shop and work on your projects. You have a great day, and I will see you maybe tomorrow.